It's our first episode back since November, and I don't feel like we've missed anything important, and everything that has happened between then and now has been normal and very chill.
There has been a lot that has gone on over our extended break.
It has been, yes.
But before I dive into it, I want to ask if you made any New Year's resolutions this year.
Yeah, I thought I'd give up drinking for a couple of months.
Good for you.
When we're recording this, it's the 15th today, is it?
The 14th.
14th. Yeah, so I'm 14 days in, feeling good, feeling thin, feeling healthy.
Good for you.
Super hydrated all the time now. Plenty of time to do things, more time in the day. It's been good.
Good for you.
Thank you.
Right
What
on.
about you? You've started drinking.
That was my resolution for this year.
Beautiful.
I start drinking. One of the things that was new in 2025 is that there are flipping taxes both provincially and federally now. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering what kind of effect that's going to have on our local Sunshine Coast real estate market.
Now, prefacing this, I'm not allowed to give any tax advice, and I'm not the smartest guy in the room when it comes to this type of thing anyway. So I'm just going to answer as far as what I know, but anyone that wants any real information on this should talk to their accountant or go online and find the appropriate resources.
Okay.
So I haven't noticed a huge amount of impact as far as this goes. I do know that, there are some people that, had bought and sold houses with me and had flipped them that aren't doing that now because, it's not, worth it for them if they do make money, which they don't always, but if they do, to then have to give away a big chunk of that.
The flipping tax, it impacts the sellers, I think, more than the buyers. But on the flip side, the federal government has changed the way that first-time home buyers can buy a home, that they've pushed out the amortization period to 30 years. And I think they raised the cap from for an insured mortgage from $1 million to $1.5 million. Does that move the needle on the Sunshine Coast for buyers or? Yeah,
I guess it allows people to qualify for more debt, which isn't necessarily good for the borrower, but great for the banks, and it kind of pushes down the road that pending situation that is probably coming up, where the economy's in recession and properties are losing value, and I don't necessarily think that it's a great thing. I think it's kind of more of a stopgap, to allow more people to get into the market. They're kind of loosening regulations, which isn't really protecting Canadians, I don't think. I mean, it's putting them into more debt for longer, allowing them to get in the market. So I think that, potentially, first-time home buyers, which we don't see a huge amount of over here.
Right.
We do see some. Our primary buyer group, is retirees, but we do see some specifically from North Vancouver, first-time buyers potentially coming over here. But, so I think it'll move the needle a little bit for that, but I don't think we're going to see a huge impact. I mean, what I get a lot of people now is they're like, hey, interest rates are coming down, the market's going to be better, right? I mean, that isn't what's happening. The last two 50 basis point rate drops that have been done by the Bank of Canada are more about pending doom and gloom in the Canadian economy as opposed to bolstering house prices or bolstering demand. That being said, there is a demand. I am noticing quite a bit of demand now, pent-up demand, because, November and December were quite slow.
Right.
And a lot of people took inventory off the market. And so the beginning of January, there was, a recent rate cut, buyers with a bit of pent-up demand. I think a lot of them are looking at it like they're now, at the bottom of the market or very close, so they can pull the trigger. But then a week later, 200 listings came on the market. So the last article I wrote in the paper, I'm like, low inventory, blah, blah, blah. And then blam, a huge amount coming on. So, there's a lot of sellers which are hanging on to that price that they think they want. Yeah. And they're eventually, like we've talked about before with chasing the market down, they're eventually, if they don't adjust their pricing and their expectations now, and they do want to sell, they're going to have to adjust it more later, and they're going to end up leaving money on the table. So that's the biggest thing that I'm seeing as far as what's moving the needle or what's happening out there is finally I'm seeing some buyers pulling the trigger because I think they're confident that waiting a bit longer isn't going to necessarily get them any better deal than they're seeing now.
So then the advice for buyers is the market is maybe still tilted in their favor. Yep. But that they want to, if they see something that they like, they should jump on it, have all their ducks in a row to move forward with it if they see something that they want. Yeah.
Obviously having something to sell isn't going to hurt you. And I mean, right now, the subject to sale offers are a dime a dozen, and you always end up paying more. And it isn't that appealing, because what's happening is I'm now going, I want to sell my house, but I'm going to rely on you selling yours.
Right.
You're better off, pricing your house right and selling to an end user. But in some cases, it does work, and people do, successfully purchase somewhere subject to selling their house. But if you can organise bridge finance or something, interim financing, so you don't have to make it subject to sale, then you're in a lot better shape than doing it that way. The other stuff that that buyers should look at now and think about is, even if you see a house that you're interested in, but it's it's overpriced based on comparable sales, don't be afraid to work with a buyer's agent and put together a package that explains your reasons for offering what you're offering and submitting that offer, because at least if you do that and the house sits on the market, a few weeks later, if your buyer hasn't moved on, or you as a buyer haven't moved on, you will get that call back. I mean, we've had that on Christina on my team and myself have had 4 or 5 sellers call us back 2 to 6 weeks after we made an offer that they said, absolutely, we won't even look at. Yeah. And ring back and go, we'll take that offer now, but, the buyers have moved on. Right. So, that's what I'd say to a buyer is, now's the time to make an offer on something that you feel is the right value for that, as more and more inventory comes on, because eventually, if they're serious sellers, they will have to sell. And, the market value is the market value. It's not a market right now where you have to overpay for a property. It's more of, if you're able to wait, then, the ideal situation is first-time buyer, pre-approved, with their deposit ready to go, renting on a month-to-month. Right. Perfect buyer. Right. Because then they can just pick and choose and wait and see what happens. We are seeing a lot of foreclosures at the moment as well, and that's only going to get worse. We talked about that in a prior podcast, is that why is the Bank of Canada dropping interest rates? Well, they're not doing it to help people that already have real estate.
Yeah, they're not trying to pump prices for real estate.
No, absolutely not.
What's the primary cause right now of the foreclosures? Is there a certain type of property that this is happening on, or is it?
I think it's just that, people buy like at the maximum amount that they can buy. Right. You know what I mean? And then once they're into that mortgage, then, the banks will offer them a interest-only line of credit or something else, or they'll increase the home equity loan, or, they'll give them money to buy a car, or whatever it is that they do. We're very debt's pushed upon people, and so what I find is that the major banks in Canada, the controllers of those banks, have said to the Bank of Canada, listen, we need it. There's a lot of people with a lot of debt that are operating at a 2% interest rate on their mortgage, and it's coming up, and they're going to be renewing at 5.5%, and we've loaded them full of this other debt on their credit card. And they're never going to be able to pay for it all. So we don't want to lose this money. So let's just let's just get them back into economic slavery for another 30 years by just loosening. There's a bit extreme of conspiracy theory, but that's
I don't think it's far off.
Well, that's essentially what happens, right? Yeah. So you end up having a 1.5% mortgage. That's your mortgage payment. You've got all your other debt that you've accumulated, you've been convinced to get a new car, and you've got everything else, you've maxed out your credit cards, and now you come to refinance this property that may not be of the same value as when you bought it, or it might be the same value as when you bought it, but now you can't get 1.5% or 2%, you've got to pay 5.5%. And then, anecdotally to here or anywhere that's had big changes in their policy as far as Airbnb, which is another misguided effort to deal with surplus immigration and lack of housing inventory, right? Thinking that, people are just going to, they can't do Airbnb anymore. So they're established and making $8,000 a month to service a property that they've bought, right? Then all of a sudden they can't get that $8,000 a month anymore, because now they're only allowed to rent long term, and the going rate for that's $2,500. And when they renew their mortgage, the mortgage payment is going to be above the $2,500, so they're going to lose money in that residence. Plus, they might not be able to ever get that tenant out, or if they do want to sell that property, unless the other people's moved in, the buyers moving into it, they're going to have to assume that tenant. So it's there's just been a lot of changes, I think, and I think that's really what's driving the foreclosure is just higher than manageable debt really for Canadians with the interest rates going up and the inflation that we've seen. I believe it's just going to get worse for the next little bit, specifically on the Sunshine Coast here. Like, well, I hadn't seen any foreclosures for the last couple of years. There was hardly any foreclosures coming up, and I think there's been 7 or 8 in the last 60 days, just in this little area. Right?
Yeah, okay.
So it's indicative, I think, of what's to come. But we'll see what happens.
With all that in mind, what would be advice for sellers in this current environment?
If you don't need to sell and you're just kind of testing the water and trying to get maximum dollar, now's not the time to do it.
Okay.
So if you don't need to sell, don't list your house. Seems like common sense, but there's a lot of serial listers out there that think that, the right buyer would come along. It's reminiscent right now, actually, because there's a lot of hungry realtors out there, I think, and so they're willing to take listings and, do what they need to do.
Yeah.
Especially if they're newer agents, they might not necessarily realise that, buying the listing or overpricing it, the market isn't going to catch up. So what you're going to end up doing if you're doing that now is you're going to end up babysitting a listing for another realtor to come along in 6 months and list it for the right price and then sell it. And you're doing a disservice to your client, because if you're overpriced now, they're going to end up, like we were saying, chasing the market down and selling it for less in the future than they could sell it for now if they price it right. So my advice to sellers, if you need to sell, is list it at fair market value and sell it. And then if you're buying into the same market, then you're going to get the same difference when you're buying the house if you're a qualified buyer. If you're just getting out of the market, because, you don't want to do Airbnb anymore or whatever it is, or you're renewing your mortgage at a higher rate and you can't service the debt, then I'd get out of it now and take your lumps and take your loss, because if you wait long, it'll cost you less. And as far as, hindsight being 2020 or whatever, obviously it is, but it would have been better to get out, last year when we found out that, Airbnb was being wrapped up in Sechelt, again, talking specifically on the coast. So, yeah.
So that's the buying side and the selling side of residential real estate. Mm-hmm. You do a lot of business in commercial real estate. Mm-hmm. What's that market like right now?
Pretty good, yeah. So we've there's always a few restaurants and stuff. So I kind of got into that. The first thing I sold was a Panago pizza franchise over here, and that came from doing a bit of door knocking, in a commercial area, because I had a restaurant that I was operating on the coast at the time as well, when I first got into real estate here. So I've always been quite involved in, leasing and selling restaurants and that kind of stuff. And I'm finding now, seasonally, we always see some restaurants come up for sale. But now it's kind of been manifested a little bit, because there was a lot of, with the CERB payments to individuals, they also gave out some money to restaurants, right?
Okay.
And the restaurants, basically, we had a natural attrition of restaurants. I mean, opening a restaurant and running a restaurant is one of the hardest things to do.
Okay.
I think 50% or 60% of them fail in the first year and 80% fail in the first 2 years. So a lot of times you'll get people that run restaurants, which are, delicate geniuses and great and artistic and everything else, but not necessarily partnered with someone or equipped that well at the back end.
Okay.
And so, like retaining profit, managing books and that kind of stuff isn't something that's, I think maybe focused on as much in the majority of restaurateur efforts. So the natural loss of restaurants that we would have seen over that time was prolonged by that CERB payment. And so now we're seeing quite a lot of them finally give up the ghost, now, as opposed to what, they would have naturally done that probably a year ago or 2 years ago. So we're seeing a lot of that. There is some commercial space available. We are seeing, kind of a lot of age-appropriate stuff go into commercial spaces. So we are seeing, wheelchair. I mean, recent ones I've leased to is like wheelchair accessibility,
like mobility
type stuff. Seen a lot of that. A lot of chiropractors and physios and that kind of thing. So I'm seeing a lot of that type of stuff go in. Still seeing a lot of small businesses dry up. A lot more franchises coming in.
Okay.
A lot of pizza shops. Like there's first it was beer stores. We had more beer production on the Sunshine Coast per capita than anywhere in Canada. Yeah. Then the weed stores came in.
Yes.
So you like beer, you like weed, you're good here.
Yeah.
It's going to be good. And now, now we're seeing pizza shops come in. So soon there should be some obesity recovery clinics coming in. They're probably the next things to come in. Yeah. So there's Domino's, Patras, AAA,
Panago, There's
they'll sit down restaurant, Bay View or whatever that one is.
There's Buono's that they're
the best pizza apparently as well. Yeah. So there's lots of pizza places going in. So that's so commercially it is quite busy, and I like doing commercial when residential is slow. We find that the commercial is still kicking over, and the commercial, what's happening in commercial is normally a precursor of when the market's going to go a little bit. I mean, our main indicator is basically what's happening in North Vancouver,
right?
The North Shore of Vancouver, I guess. And so when that's popping off, we start to see things picking up here. But right now, I think we're normally 6 weeks behind. So normally probably in the next month, we're going to see things start to come to life a little bit here.
As far as commercial real estate's concerned, you've had a little bit of a brush with fame or with media, I guess, recently with that as well?
A little bit, yeah. So it was the Murder in a Small Town. So when they came over here, whatever it was, when they shot the first series last year, they were, me and Grant Marshall do the majority of the commercial stuff here. So they're contacting us looking for places to rent or to do, wardrobe or, have like a warehouse, that kind of thing. So, I rented a few things to them, and in doing that, I thought, well, we should watch this Fox show because it's set in Gibsons. And, every movie that comes out, whether it's like Needful Things back in the day or, the St. Cloud movie with that, I can't remember who that was.
Zac Efron,
yeah. And any of them. So you watch them and you're like, this is amazing. It's like any movie shot in Vancouver. Like when I used to live in Vancouver, we spent a lot of time driving around as a sales guy, and so you've been everywhere. So you're like, iRobot, I went through that tunnel all the time. Me and Carolyn love sitting around watching that show and like figuring out where things are. The thing we find quite frustrating is when they walk in the direction, like the librarian chick will be like, I'm off back to the library, and she walks from Molly's Reach towards the ferry, and we're like, it's the wrong direction. Stuff like that, right? Or like when they come out and they go, I got to get some cash out, and they go across the street from Leo's, and I'm like, there's no cash machine there. And then it's American money. I'm like, American money. So what I've determined, I've done some research for you, knowing you might ask me this question. So the Sunshine Coast is located just off the coast of Oregon.
Okay.
All right.
This is in the show.
In the show.
Yes.
Yeah. Go to Oregon and then just go off the coast about 2.5 miles, and there's a set of islands out there. And on those islands, there's Gibsons and Half Moon Bay and Pender Harbour and all the other names that you know and love from the coast, except we are an island. And it looks very, very similar to our Gibsons, except everything's in the different direction. The other thing we found out is, statistically speaking, it would be rare. Now, they have the same populations up there. They've said that the year-round population's between 5,000 and 15,000 on the show. I believe that they said that.
Okay.
And so to have those many murders per capita, it's the most dangerous place in North America other than maybe Chicago.
So that was last season that they shot.
Yeah.
But now just here, I think a few days ago, it was announced they're shooting a second season.
Yep.
And you've been in contact with them about the second season. So they're already getting geared up to shoot the second season.
Well, I got in touch with, Rachel Dempster out of my office. Her husband works on the show. So she rang, giving me a heads up that they were coming and seeing what commercial stuff was available. So there was a commercial unit I had listed on the backside of Sechelt. It doesn't really matter. Okay. But yeah, so they rented that out for a few months. So they're going to be here shooting until June, I believe, May. Yeah, June. And then that'll be seasons 2 wrapped up.
We talked about interest rates. We talked about flipping taxes. We talked about chasing the market down. We talked about murder in a small town.
We talked about murder.
All there is left to talk about now is what houses you have for sale in February 2025.
The first one will be 655 Dougal Road. That one was on a little bit last year. We took it off and we've put it back on just because I kind of had the feeling that, there was some pent-up demand in the market. So if that one's still available, it's a fantastic listing. It's a 3-bed, 2-bath, just under 1,400 square feet. Completely brand new inside, beautiful setting, very private. It's got like a little pond running through, a little creek running through it. Really, really nice private back area, hot tub, really, really good. Little guest suite as well. And it's a weird one because you don't normally get that much privacy in that area, yeah. So it's kind of like your little oasis in the middle of town, but you walk out, the market's there, the paddling club's right there, the marina's right there, everything you could want right there. That one, great. You don't really need a car at all for that one. If you've got an umbrella, you're good to go. And then we've got 6159 South Gale. That's a new build by Westcan Construction. Colin put that one together. It's got a legal suite, beautiful big home, wicked view, all the mod cons in there. And that one you really have to see to appreciate that one. We've got a few open houses booked up there, but that one's available, and quick possession is an option on that one. And then we also have 783 Courtney Road in Granthams Landing, which is a lot that's got a build-ready site on it in Vista Ridge.
Okay.
And that's you've been up there, that's a
lovely, gorgeous spot, great views.
Yeah. Close to everything, and all the big wigs from Gibsons live in that area. Yeah. I won't name them by name, but if you
know who they are.
They know who they are. So they're the three that I want to focus on for February, if they're all available. Otherwise, just go to teamtrueblue.ca and click on our listings. You can see what we got on offer. Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. While you're here, maybe you want to check out one of my listings or watch my video about why you should choose me to sell your home.